Welcome everyone. I am so glad that you are back. We have a wonderful topic on tonight. This is week 7 of Baggage Claim. Unpack Your Bags with Dr. Danita. The purpose of these weekly shows is to provide information for you. The series is on racial trauma and how it affects our mental health, and we have just had some amazing topics, some amazing guests, and we have two amazing guests on this evening as well. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that these lives are not a substitute for professional counseling. You could possibly hear something that could potentially trigger you. Um, we definitely want you to reach out to a professional. Take a moment to step away if you need to, that's fine. But again, these are educational lives and they're not meant to substitute professional counseling. So we're going to get started on tonight. Baggage Claim, Unpack Your Bags with Dr. Danita. Tonight's show is Black Assimilation. So tonight we're going to talk about cultural assimilation, specifically with Black people, respectability politics, cultural appreciation versus appropriation. We're going to talk about code switching, and we have two guests on tonight that we're going to bring on now. We have Avery Covington and we have Nakima Missouri. Nakima is one of our team members at the Counseling Center, and Avery is actually one of my adopted sons, and we're just excited for the two of them to share on tonight. They're passionate about the topic, and that's usually what I'm looking for, people who are passionate about the topics that are presented each week. And so we're just going to take a moment. Nakima, if you would just introduce yourself, share a little bit about who you are, your passion, and then we'll have Avery introduce himself. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Dr. Danita. Again, my name is Nakima Missouri. I'm so proud to walk with Dr. Danita, both under her tutelage as a counselor and therapist with Mending Hearts Family Counseling, also as a sister in Christ, and then just as a fellow sojourner, both as a woman and then doubly as a Black woman. I'm also a mother raising young Black men, young Black women. And so these issues are very near and dear to my heart, particularly because 3 of them are in that space of life where they're really impacted by the events, the current events going on. And so we've been able to have some really rich discussions connecting both our present day situations to some historic situations that mimic what's happening now, but also are very different and unique in their own way. So I'm happy to be here, happy to share with you tonight, and happy to converse. Avery?
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Avery Covington. I am a pre-law graduate from Rowan University. Firstly, I'm just excited to be here. Thank you, Dr. Danita, for giving me this opportunity. I cannot wait to dive in on such a powerful topic. As you know, and many of us do, that this is my passion. I love and I believe I'm a conversationalist around the topic of the advancement of Black and Brown people. So I just cannot wait to dig in and let's do it.
All right. So again, we're talking tonight about cultural assimilation, specifically as it relates to Black people, Black and Brown community. And if you are just coming in, if you don't mind, please do like and share, give a few thumbs up, a few hearts, so that I can know that you're here. And if I can see that you are a sharer, I'll know that your friends are getting the benefit of this night's show. And so let's get started. I was looking at some YouTubes and reading some material. It's just a lot of research when you're preparing for these lives. And one thing that caught my attention as I was listening to one of the YouTubes, one of the speakers was talking about how, as a black woman, and for me, I didn't think it was just necessarily only black people that experienced this, but she talked about the 8-second rule. She talked
Mm.
about the first eight. That's what she called it, the first eight. And she said that the first 8 seconds, the first 8 feet, and the first 8 words that come out of your mouth will determine or will be how people judge you. And so when I started to think about it, I know that as any time that we are about to present, or any time that we're about to go into a new situation, people are always saying, "Oh, put your best foot forward. Make sure you put your best foot forward." When you think about putting your best foot forward as it relates to being a black person, is putting that best foot forward any different from another person putting their best foot forward? What do you think?
Well, this is a very rich question, particularly when you consider it from the psychological point of view. First impressions, psychologically speaking, are a really big deal. Social cognition talks about how people make, we all do, split second judgments about who the other person is once we encounter them. And these split second impressions are based on external things, but also internal biases. And several researchers have indicated that these impressions can last for months and months, even in the face of contradictory evidence. So, you talk about that from the perspective of being a Black person. Um, when we are encountering a new person, it's not only that person's cultural depiction creating their first impression. It's not only the environment that we're in creating that person's first impression. It's not only things like gender or the topic, right? So, whatever circumstance we're meeting the first person under, but it's also history or implicit associations that they may have made with people such as you. So that could be, of course, applicable to being woman, your sexual orientation, but definitely, right, we have to think about that in terms of your cultural identity. So, as an African American, we can almost, in many cases, unfortunately, assume that when we are presented with someone new, that we're not only working through those initial judgments of those first impressions that we all make, but we're also working through whatever implicit um, ideas and associations that person has of Black people. And because a lot of our associations are negative, because a lot of our associations through media, through various experiences, just we're constantly fighting that image of how we're portrayed. It's almost like meeting someone for the first time and you know that you've already been talked about poorly to that person, right? So you can put your best foot forward, but you're also working against kind of that earful of mess that someone's put in their ear about you. And that's the challenge that we sit in all the time, I believe,
Yeah.
with first
So,
impressions.
Yeah, that's
so,
good.
so what do you think,
Good.
Avery? What do you think? Some of, like, concretely, what does that whole best foot forward kind of look like for Black people?
Yeah, and I just want to thank Nikema for just expounding upon that. For a Black person like myself, my best foot forward isn't just my best foot. I have to make sure that I'm the best in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times, we get that talk at our homes that you cannot just be good. You have to be better than good to get the same kind of jobs and get the same kind of opportunities that many others who do not have the same hue are afforded as us. And so when I think of the best foot forward, a part of it is, of course, outdoing not just myself, but outdoing the environment I'm about to go into. And especially when you're in a competitive industry, you have to really begin to process, how am I going to outdo all these people that are coming in? And yes, there is a blatant average idea that it's going to be competitive. It's a job. We understand that. But Black people in America have a very specific task to outdo not just that normal standard, but above that. And that second portion, Dr. Benita, I believe, is when you're going into these environments. For Black people, we have to consider what the environment will do for or to us. And so I don't know if anybody else experienced this, but for me, I have to ask, how does that environment appreciate Black people? How does that environment respond to a Black presence, a Black male presence? Because it doesn't matter if I have my best foot forward if I'm about to walk in quicksand. And so I just have to make sure that the environment is conducive for my Black body and my Black agency.
Yeah, yeah. Um, when we think about putting the best foot forward and outdoing, so you mentioned this outdoing. So when we think about outdoing, are we outdoing based on who we are, or are we taking on others' culture and trying to outdo based on this? So I'm bringing in assimilation now. So are we kind of like being engrafted in their behaviors and outdoing based on how they perceive we should be outdoing? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the game Black people are constantly playing. As Avery was talking about, you walk into a room and you're not only sizing up how appropriate, how appreciative it is for Black presence, Black body, Black thought. Um, but you're also sizing up how assimilated you need to be, how
Yeah.
authentic you can be in this space. Dion Cole talks about putting on your white talk
Yeah.
when you're at work, right? And how you have to get that water cooler talk on, at times. And in other situations, you can let it roll and, give that head nod to someone in the room. But Black people are constantly in a space making those calculations, and determining with great risk, how they need to position themselves, how much they need to assimilate, and how authentic they can be in a moment.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. What we are outdoing in part is something so invisible yet so visible, right? What we're outdoing is white supremacy slash white opinion, right? Stereotypes that like Nakima was saying earlier, that may not be our narrative, but have gone before us. And so we're not only outdoing ourselves, we're not only outdoing the people in the room, now we're outdoing a narrative that's invisible that might not even be my story. But because I'm Black, I have to assume that others might think so as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Nakima, you talked about with doing so with great risk. What can you expound upon these great risks?
Sure. I mean, if you look at business research and just again, sociological research, when people are engaging with one another, you're working through people's impressions of your trustworthiness, your competence, and just your values, right? And that's again across the board.
Yeah,
So when you are African American, um, you somewhat understand that, you know, if there's five of us, maybe three of us can have a mishap in the room and we can recover quickly. Maybe, him over there, he can put his foot in his mouth, or she can, say a flub, and people will kind of laugh it off. But if you do it, if you make a social flub, if you don't, if you give that head nod, or you allow yourself to a little too much authenticity, you can lose opportunity. You can lose impression again that will last for months. So even though you show up at work, even though you're killing it, even though you show up to that next board meeting and you slayed that presentation, they will see the night before. They will see when you didn't get it right, when you were a little too black or something that
Yeah.
just didn't sit right with them. Again, as Avery was saying, when you indicated too closely with the narrative,
Yeah.
and that's the risk that we are under
Mm.
all the time.
Yeah, you talked about being authentic. Have you ever experienced being able to just be you and it be okay in white spaces, I should say? Of course, at home we can just be us and it be okay.
Yeah.
But you talk about putting on the white voice. You talk about the water cooler voice. So now we're talking about code switching. Is it?
Right.
Have we ever? Have you ever experienced? I could just be me.
Mm.
No.
I
No.
was going to say, Avery, you got to take that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I think in part, I think in part it's due to the reality that when America sees me, and I say America, I try not to use too much overgeneralization, but history has shown us that when America sees a black man, many see a threatening opposition. And so because of that, I have to do tone policing when discussing problems. I have to really take a moment and delay addressing a situation in the workplace in order to just graft my thoughts and make sure that I'm not coming off too threatening or that my passion would not be indicative of anger or rage or things of this nature. And we have a subtlety. It's like in the back of our mind continually. Like, am I doing? Is what I'm saying or am what I'm doing too quote unquote ghetto for the workplace, or is my hair? I remember I just my hair is not always like this. I did a hair change and I came to Dr. Danita and I said, hey, well, is my putting braids? Do you think that might be a problem? Because as Black people, the whole essence of us is being judged at the table, and that's not necessarily, we cannot say that for a blanket for all other people. That is very peculiar and particular to the minority people of America.
So Nakima, Avery spoke specifically about what it's like being a black man going into these spaces. Do you feel that we as black women have the same experience in going into spaces, or are you able to? Have you ever been able to be your authentic self?
So I think the unfortunate thing is, I think Black women, at least at the front, and um, this is somewhat conjecture, but I think Black women have a little bit more of an openness, a little bit more runway at the beginning with others. However, one thing that is very similar is not necessarily threatening, right? But for some reason, this anger or this coarseness is anticipated or kind of being watched when it comes
Yeah.
to Black folk. It's a very much like, just like a side eye watch, like, oh, is she going to blow at some point? What's it going to be like if you tick her off, or if she gets crossed? And also, I think Black women face the constant run of indicating competence
Mhm.
in the workplace and in the white community.
Yeah.
It's not enough. I think again we're open to be let in, but it's a constant uphill battle and kind of scratching at the wall and grasping to persistently show that we belong, that we belong in the room, that we belong at the table, that we belong in the conversation. Um, and I think Black women have to chase that, constantly asking or constantly knocking and no, I need to be here. Or, looking for those subtly being left out, subtly being passed over, subtly
Mhm.
being pushed aside.
Yeah.
And it's in those ways that we need to be more strategic in terms of keeping that impression that we're competent.
And,
Yeah.
and I
Go
just
ahead.
want to add, Dr. Danita, that that was so good. And many times, I've been in workplaces where there was a form of initiation, almost, where it was almost like a testing period. Let's see how. They wouldn't say this, of course, but the underlying theme behind the testing was, let's see how black this person really is, right? And so certain topics and the forms of discussion would come about just to see how far you would go, or how deep you would dive, whether it be a politic or whether it be a type of food. And I don't know about anybody else, but I refused to eat fried chicken on lunch break because I said I would not. I refuse to be the stereotype. You ain't gonna catch me with grape soda, no watermelon, no chicken. I'm not doing none of it because and hey, if you like it, you like it. But I knew in the back of my mind that this is something that could be perceived another way, that I did not ask for.
Yeah, that's good. And Nikema, thank you for sharing. And I want to just put in a plug for next week's show because we are going to talk specifically about women in the workplace, and
Yeah.
um,
Good.
Black women, and these specific struggles that we also have. And so next Tuesday, that particular topic we're going to
Yeah.
tackle.
Yeah.
So definitely tune in next Tuesday as well as we delve into the topic of working with Black women. So we talked a little bit about, I alluded to code switching as you were talking, Avery, and there's this question: code switch or not to code switch? Should we code switch? Should we not code switch? Um, or should we look at it as um, this duality that we have, that it's a skill set? Do we necessarily have to look at it in a negative way, or could we look at it as this is a skill set that we have that possibly white people don't? Talk to me about code switch or not to code switch.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think, and I'm probably going to be very frustrating here because my psychology brain says, everyone code switches, right? Like, and Dr. Danita, you can attest to this. We have these folks come into our rooms, and they sit in our chair, and at first impression, again, right? They are upstanding citizens, great family people. They're rock stars in their community. They get up every day, they put their pants on, they raise their kids, but then they start to tell you their story and reveal to you their narrative.
Mm.
And you can ask yourself, wow, how do you show up to school every day? How do you show up to work every day? How do you show up in these spaces? And this is the narrative running in the background of your life. This is who you are, what you're dealing with when you reach the doors of your home at night.
Mm.
So to some extent, it's human to code switch. It's psychologically speaking, it's a human experience. Certainly Black people do it in a very unique and specific way, in that it's almost like we do it twice, right? We have to both do it in that very humanistic way, but then we have to also do it culturally. Um, and before kind of anyone kind of takes me on this, because again, psychologically, there is that element for all people, um, but every layer is this added layer for the African American, um, that I'm attempting to size up the culture, not just in terms of what its steady state is, but then also in terms of placing my Blackness within that cultural space in a non threatening way. And what do I need to put on in terms of, as Avery was saying, tone or voice or appearance, or even me as a African American woman, right, walking into a space, sometimes I'll say, you think my hair's too big?
Yeah.
Right? Like, questions like that are part of the code. Do I constantly need to have it in a bun? Right? Or can I like let my mane out and let it be
Yeah.
free?
Yeah.
That's not something that any other people group has to have that conversation with themselves as they prepare to face the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm thinking a big part of code switching is the language, the dialect, and changing it to meet the standards of the European Western Standard English that has been established. But when I think of some white people that I have encountered in conversation in very professional settings that use prepositions at the end of the sentence, it is still acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yes, we all do code switch in terms of we're going into a business setting, and so we looked up. Everybody, knows that they're going on an interview. There's certain things you wear on an interview. If you're going into
Right.
a corporate setting, there are behaviors for a corporate setting. But as you stated, Nakima, there's still another level. There's
Yeah.
still things that other people get away with that we
Yeah.
don't.
And doctor, it's the reality is what it's saying is that my culture, a piece of my culture, is a threat to you. And that is the piece that really for the black person just grinds your gears, to know that a piece of yourself can't come in this space, not because it's necessarily bad, but because it might be threatening to your peers around you, to your counterparts around you. When I think of code switching, in part, I was thinking about this earlier today. It's a survival tactic
Mm,
for Black Americans right now in the industry of work. It is a survival tactic. We need to make sure that we go in, get the paycheck, not ruffle any feathers. You can if you want to. You might get fired, but you can, and then leave with that paycheck to feed your family and your home. It's a survival tactic. And last thing I'll say about this, I was watching a law gathering in Clubhouse, and they were one of the lawyers brought up the idea of code switching in terms of that industry, and these were all Black lawyers, of course. And one of the things they were saying is the sad reality is you have to play the game, and
mm,
that's so sad that many Black people feel like they just have to play the game in
mhm.
order to get ahead in America. And yeah, I'll just leave that there.
But it depends, I think, though, on how you've been able to slide into America. Because I'm thinking about Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey does not code switch. Of course, Steve Harvey has a lot of money, but at some point, he slid in, and he never had to. He just does not. And I can't think right now of other names, but I just remember hearing dialogue or hearing people in public settings, public figures, of course. And I'm like, oh wow, that's cool that they could just make all
Yeah,
the money and be in all of these spaces, white spaces, and people accept that and they're fine with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think an interesting point to that brings up, and it's just a thought. I don't mean to purport anything necessarily, but looking historically,
mhm,
um, at times white people have been okay, accepted, if that piece of their blackness was something white folks wanted. So we like, or they like the comedian
Mm.
or the minstrel, right, as it used to be,
Hmm.
um, the
hmm,
musician.
hmm,
Uh, so that persona, that part. was okay. And there are other almost caricatures in that way, right? Like personified pieces of an element of who you are that personified, okay, we're okay with, we'll accept you. um if that's the package, if that's the personality package you're bringing about. Other parts, not so much. So if you're making us laugh, or you're dancing, or
That's
you're
so
playing
good.
sports, right,
Wow.
then you're cool. Like, we
Wow.
accept that part of you, we accept who you are there. um
Yeah.
That's good,
yeah.
Nikema. That's good.
Yeah. That's real good.
Really
That's
good.
the truth.
Yeah, yeah. I want to go back to you talked about, you walk into space, is my hair okay? Is it too big? Should I have kept it in a bun? And I'm thinking about, what you're saying. And so we, as Black people, have to, have those processes. Should I have worn cornrows? Should I not wear cornrows? Should
Yeah.
I cut my hair? Is it okay for me as a Black man to have these braids?
Yeah.
How should I enter this space? But yet, when we think about those who, so we're being judged for how we present, but then you have those who are of the lighter hue who will take those same braids and put those same buns in their hair and be accepted. So I'm
Mhm.
thinking of Kim Kardashian. She can wear braids all day long.
Oh yeah.
And so now we slide into this topic of cultural appropriation versus appreciation. So, what are your thoughts about that? Well, first, tell us what it is: cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation.
Yeah. I
Go
think,
for it, Avery.
yeah, I think we can define cultural appropriation as using elements of one's culture, of another's culture, in a derogatory manner or in a manner in which to parade it. But the history of that very element indicates oppression. So, for example, you used Kim Kardashian. It's amazing that for her, braids gets her almost a million likes on Instagram when there are women who have worn braids at job opportunities and have been discriminated against and castigated due to the texture and the quote unquote kinkiness of their hair. And so I would say that's cultural appropriation in itself. But I'd say cultural appreciation is the understanding of the beauty behind that element, and not necessarily taking that element out of its culture, but being able to value it as is for that group of people.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts, Nakima, about those two?
This, I don't land very clear or neatly here.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it is really hard because, like, um I would agree, I think, with what Avery's saying, that in a sense I would feel the same, Kim Kardashian appropriating. But then Adele, just a few months ago, was on the line for wearing cornrows, donning, um, I believe it was Jamaican attire in celebration of their carnival, or maybe it was Independence Day, I can't remember. But she was celebrating, and at kind of a quarantined, I know it was during our quarantine time. Um, and I was like, I think I'm okay with Adele, like, because for me, as I read the story, it seemed like she had a history, she had her own connections. She was part of the family in some sense, and others could argue, I think, for Kim, with her connection with Kanye. But I don't land cleanly. I really don't, and I do agree with Avery. I agree with everything that he said. I think it's one of those spaces that really needs to be handled delicately. Um, I think that you can, and I probably would say my my kind of arm in arm with Adele in that moment was, I think she was invited, right, to the cookout, so to speak. And
Mm.
I think she was, right, engaging and appreciating from that standpoint. I'm invited here, I'm a guest. Um, but in other cases, it's taken.
Yeah.
Right.
And, and sometimes that's a sense, but sometimes that's very clear that you're not donning it as a guest, as an honored guest. Here, you came into our home, we
Yeah.
offered you this,
Yeah.
and you engaged with us in
Yeah.
this moment and in this space, versus you took it and you tried to take it as your own.
Yeah, and if I can just piggyback off of that, I agree totally. To keep it,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
definitely isn't a clean cut, right? So there, it will not be a principal rule for all cases. Um, but I just agree and just underscore the point of history, that when you see throughout history the oppression with some of these elements that are being paraded now, it does cause a people group to take a step back. Like, wait, we've been going through this. I mean, Maryland in 2020 just passed the Crown Act for hair to be like protected and not discriminated against. In 2020, Maryland, the Senate in Maryland, New Jersey, California, and some other states passed that kind of legislation. So prior to that, you could have possibly been discriminated against because you have braids in your hair. And it's just that level of understanding of that oppression. If that accompanies with your expression, I don't know. I don't want to seem like the gatekeeper of the cookout. I don't want to put myself in the front of the fence. You know what I'm saying? But I will say that we need to see an expression of history when you're discussing cultural appropriation versus appreciation.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I don't know if it was a court case or not, but I remember reading about this woman who was wearing cornrows, and her job, her boss told her that she wasn't permitted, and this was back years ago. And so she was sharing that this is cultural for her, and it was around the time that Bo Derek had starred in her movie and wore her cornrows, and this particular boss told this black woman, this is not a cultural thing. You're just doing that because you just saw it in the movie with Bo Derek. Like how ignorant, first of all, is that? But that's really like people really do they really not get that this is a cultural experience? Like are their heads buried under the sand or what? I don't get it.
Yeah, I had a colleague I used to work with, and we were working in the same law office. And she came in one day. She was very upset. And this is a white, older white woman. She was very upset, and I was like, what's wrong, Miss? And she, I would come to her every day. How are you doing, and things of that nature. She said, I just heard something on the news that's so crazy. She said, what is the problem with blackface? I just don't understand. Then she went on to say, back in the day, we wore blackface when we went to Halloween and we dressed up as the Jackson Five. I think the issue comes with, and at first I used to believe that it's all about education, like let's educate people. But nowadays, even the educated people, we have a problem with nowadays. But I think for her in that moment, the history was just not there. She didn't know the types of oppression that black bodies went through that were powdered and became a tar for a black face paint. She didn't understand that history behind that. And so for her, it just bypassed her. And I know that's a more extreme example, but when we're dealing with a cultural appropriation, I feel like it is deeply important that we be students and that black people are not responsible for white education.
Right.
it is on the onus of white individuals to go. It wasn't, we didn't get permission to endure oppression. So you all don't get permission to endure studying about the oppression, about American history. And that's just where I tap my hat at right there. Yes.
So, what happens when they choose not to? We used that word last week, agnotology, the choice,
Mm,
choosing to remain ignorant. So, what happens?
That's really, I think that's the tough, I think that's the tough space.
yeah.
And, um, and I might be jumping the gun here. I know we'll probably get to um, talking about Miss Owens, Miss Candace Owens in a moment. Um, but I think some, you know, I think when some of us become that frustrated, we go to that extreme side where we start to communicate a message of, um, well, and I take her as almost our modern day Booker T. Washington.
Mm,
Um, you know, getting very pull yourself up by bootstraps, and really just focusing on self and self empowerment and not worrying about their education, their movement forward, their progress in the knowledge or in the understanding. I think she takes it again all the way over to that other side.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but what it also brings up for me in a more balanced and tempered way are words that members of my community, where they were not assimilate or die, they really believed in
Yeah.
Black enterprise, Black empowerment, and Black ownership. And I
That's
think
good.
from them they would say that, at the end of the day, Black people, and here is probably a little bit more Marcus Garvey, where if they decide to ally or not, Black people are at the place and always are at the place of coming together, rebuilding, restructuring our community, and making sure that we are well and whole. Um, White allyship, if it comes, is helpful. We can use it for our purposes. They won't come in and direct, right, the movement, the work. Um, but the work doesn't stop, and the work is not beholden to their movement in any way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. So
Um,
good.
Kima, you stated earlier, and we are about to go into talking about Candace Owens and other Black conservatives. But you said, you made this statement when we were talking about appropriation versus appreciation. You said like you don't like land,
Cleanly, yeah.
yeah, you don't land cleanly. What about because just another example popped in my head. Where would you land with this one? McDonald's, millions of dollars clearly they get off of saying I'm loving it. We don't get to drop the endings of our words, the endings. We just don't. But they get to say I'm loving it, and it's cool. It's good. Where do you land with that one?
Yeah. Uh you got you. I mean, I don't even know that I want to say you got me, but um I think this is a place where, my black blood does start to boil a little bit. Um because I do get disheartened with so much of our, like, everyone loves our culture,
Mm-hmm.
not us. They don't love us, but they love our culture.
Yeah.
And our culture is constantly, um, commoditized,
Yeah.
constantly commoditized at our detriment, meaning we're not the owners we're not the benefactors.
Yeah.
Our culture is out here in the street turning hand over fist and making so much money and so much profit. And um I mean, like, you can't even watch a Disney show anymore and rarely see one of our beautiful babies, but everyone's rapping,
Mm.
everyone's dancing, the latest hip hop dances.
Wow.
um and maybe there's one of us, maybe there's not. And so I think I do take it back to, there has to be a space and a place where we are really focusing on owning our own. And if someone wants it, you have to come to us
Mhm.
Yeah.
to get what belongs to us.
Yeah. 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 The power of ownership is so good. It's so good. I remember one time I went into the office in that same conversation. I asked Dr. Danita about my hair, and I asked her, I said, well, what do you think about, as a Black woman hair? And Dr. Danita reminded me that, well, I own this practice. And so that the power of ownership, where you don't have to assimilate, but you create a culture
Right.
that is inclusive, that is diverse, that and I think there's power there. Even like you said about Marcus Garvey and how we as Black people, not saying that we're becoming Black nationalists, but we're
Right.
just becoming invested in Black advancement. That's all it is. We're becoming
Right.
invested in Black mobilization, in Black health, in Black spaces, and in Black wealth. And so I just think ownership is, and that's
Definitely.
why I love seeing this resurgence of entrepreneurship in our air, in our culture, this awakening that, everyone has a business. Some people say that derogatory. I love it. This is what I believe is going to create an agency and autonomy in the
Mm-hmm.
Black community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. You were saying, that I get to say that I own this place, and I was just thinking about this conversation that I had today with one of the counselors, and he says to me, because we were talking about him being the only white male in the practice, and he says, but I feel very comfortable. I feel like I'm part of the family, and I've never felt any different. And this is the best place, the best job that I've ever had. And I thought about like what that's. I mean, I feel very honored, that we've created this space that everyone feels comfortable. But then I started to think, we don't get to say that. We don't get to say that we go and we're the only Black person in a workspace and we just feel so comfortable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It just so
real.
very rarely happens.
That's so real.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about Candace Owens and other Black conservatives. That's our question for tonight. That we posted. And so this is the opportunity for you all who are watching tonight for you to go ahead and weigh in with your comments. So we asked the question tonight, is Candace Owens and other Black conservatives, like, are they the token ambassadors for Black and Brown people? Are they our representatives? And if so, like, what would you say to white people who say, well, Candace Owens doesn't talk about racism and she doesn't talk about these experiences that everyone in the streets are talking about? Like, why can't we all be like a Candace Owens? Your thoughts?
What do you think, Avery?
Nikiwa. I guess I'll start. Firstly, Candace Owens is a Black woman, and so I do want to start there. That although her and I have extreme disagreements, if not polar opposite, if not parallel universes that we both come from. She is a Black woman, and with all due respect to her. With that being said, and pleasantries out the way, I genuinely believe that if anyone is pandering an idea that suggests that Candace Owens speaks on behalf of all Black people, they are in fact engaging in a form of prejudice, if not discrimination. It is the burden of minorities that we represent the whole. Not white people do not have to go through that same burden. It is our burden. And anybody who engages in that kind of discussion in that language, I really wonder: are you really um, trying to have a genuine discussion around the issues, or are you just looking for someone who fits your description of what you want most Black people to think? And I just want to make a point of distinction. I do not believe Black conservatism is an issue. I think, for many of us, philosophically speaking, much of the Black community is conservative. Fiscally, not so much, but socially speaking, much of the Black community is conservative. So I don't think Black conservatism is an issue. I think Candace Owens, in particular, um, speaks to more of her rise came as Trump arose, and I think she speaks to more of a Trump supporting issue mixed with she just brings more language. She just brings a weapon of reason for someone who already disagreed with the majority in the first place. And yeah. And last thing I'll say about Candace Owens, and we'll dialogue even more, but you have to also discern what spaces is she working in and speaking in. Rarely will you find Candace Owens in spaces where majority of Black people are or watch. And so that is a question too. It's like, who are you trying to pull? Because many of these spaces, like Fox News, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, it's not a space that many Black people watch. And if you're trying to awaken a Black community, you would want to have an audience geared toward the Black community. And so I just think, again, she's a weapon in the hands of people who already are solidified in their belief system. And when people bring her up, I really don't think they're genuinely looking for a building discussion. They're kind of planted where they are.
That's good. Thanks, Avery. All right, Nakima, you ask Avery to go first.
Yeah. I'm ready. I'm ready to support. So I think moving right off of Avery's commentary that, Candace kind of sits in and is housed in these spaces that, um, just generally speaking, are not our spaces. And I think the reason is such that, um, if you think about whiteness as a construct, right? And this idea of like whiteness. And so from that, you go to white thought or white thinking. She represents the age old adage in our nation of, why can't you Black people just get it together?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the issue? And then here it goes, right? Because it doesn't just stop there. It goes to, my grandfather came here. He didn't have anything. He had 12 kids, and he worked his hands to the bone and worked 18 hours, and now we're millionaires. Or my mother came here, and right, and then these stories, right, proliferate, right? And so, and then it's an indictment, right? These statements, these narratives, the ways of using this language is an indictment to Black people and to the Black narrative. It's a challenge that, you know, everything you talk about in terms of your oppression and this uh, narrative of, other people being racist against you, it basically is saying like, no, that's a farce, because look at all these other examples and you should be able to do it as well. And this is kind of where she finds her stage, in this kind of mindset, in this kind of thinking. And so she has a platform, right? And she sits in those courts where she is able to purport that type of thinking, and she, right, sits in the courtyard of others that are like, yeah, we're thinking the same thing, like they should just be able to get it together and do what they need to do. Like, listen, it's a free country, everybody else is coming here making it, you guys have been here, what's the problem? um and that in large part is uh the reason for her popularity, because she is black and upholds that white thought. And then also, right, as Avery was saying, it it solidifies that indictment
Yeah.
that, see, it's you black people is
Mm.
really the issue. It's not us. It's not them. It's not. It's you. And that is definitely how it becomes weaponized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonder
Yeah.
though, I wonder how much pressure it is for her, or whether she even realized that she's probably only one statement, or one wrong thought, one wrong word communicated to the public, and that would be it, because she still is a black woman. Period. So
Yeah.
she has to consistently be on her game to
Yeah.
consistently be accepted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Kind of doing her own code switching and monitoring her own authenticity and monitoring her own points of assimilation. Um,
Would
you
you
know, and
have
I
of a sellout, like she's completely assimilated? When we talk about assimilation, we mean we take on all of the marginalized group takes on all of the behaviors and customs and of the dominant group.
Mm.
Or do you think that she's kind of like just doing what is it, respectability politics, where you are just trying to um, make sure that those stereotypes that are typical for the group are not what's elevated and not what's depicted? Like, did
Mm.
she just sell out, or?
Yeah, I like to try to sit her somewhere in that spectrum in the middle, right? I want to believe that her goal is from a place of sincerity, like, and what I mean by that is, um and again, I'll go back to my Booker T. Washington analogy where, um I there's an essence of it where she desires for black people, black community, black families. Come on, let's let it be us. Let's use our resources. Let's do what we got to do, and rise, you know, on our own. Like, we have this, we have that, we have these entities. Let's use it to make the progression happen and not focus on these ideas of oppression anymore. Almost in a sense that distracts us. Let's just work on moving forward and bettering ourselves and uplifting ourselves. I just give her the benefit of the doubt there that it's coming from that place.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
and I think so. I think in that space, it kind of leans more into the presentation of it is an attempt to be the that respectable politics. But I think in probably just being in the crowd and speaking, it you can't you can't press into that area and devalue the
Hmm.
narrative. You
Hmm.
can't undermine um, the challenges, the oppressions, and just the outright death and killing and murder that continues to be a part of our experience. They both have to be held in some way, even if in your heart of hearts your goal is to just move us forward.
Yeah.
Right, right.
For one who
Um,
talks.
um, they said, be on her A game to continue to play the game. That should be exhausting. And
Mm.
yeah, I can't, I don't know her personally, but
Right.
it would have to be exhausting.
Yeah.
But you said something, Nikema, about her possibly, you trying to give her the benefit of the doubt that she just wants us as a people to kind of rise up and move forward. That is I think, the narrative of those who are privileged within our group. So Candace,
Mm.
she's privileged. So she can say those things. And she does make very accurate statements. She says the problem with our communities is fatherlessness. Well, yes, fatherlessness is a serious issue. But then she doesn't delve into how we got there.
Yeah. Yeah.
She makes it seem like all these fathers just decided to just get up and walk out the door and never come back. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
talk about the systemic, issues with drugs, and the systemic issues with being arrested, and all of it. She doesn't talk about any of that. She just says, if we bring back the fathers to the communities, we would be in a better situation.
Yeah. Yeah, we're speaking about, and Candace Owens is definitely a microcosm, a representative of something that is pervasive in our culture. And I do believe it's in part due to the rise of Trumpism, not necessarily Trump, but Trumpism. It's this idea where we can just say anything with shock value and it be fact. That is something that she excels at tremendously, very similar to Donald Trump to his base. It's this idea that I can just say stuff with not unsubstantiated, no fact behind it. I can just say stuff, and this like feeds people, and it makes her go viral, and even the headings on her. And so this is why, while I do believe, I pray, my heart says, my heart is praying, that she is someone who's genuine about the advancement of our people. But when I look at her history and know that she too had an experience of the sting of racism, I mean, we find that in her settlement in the courts, where she was castigated against, was discriminated against in a very harsh way, and people can do their own research on that. So a woman who has experienced this kind of sting of racism and yet is able to quickly divorce the pain of it. For me, in my mind, I sit in a place of, I don't want to say it, but I do,
Mm.
opportunistic, almost borderline, not a sellout, almost a borderline. She's selling herself. She's compromising her person so that there could be revenue.
Yeah.
And I don't want to
A
reduce her
lot.
to that. Yeah, yeah, but that's just something that I see in her history, in her presentation, and it's sad because many of us know that this has happened before, and what usually happens with cases like this is that they, meaning the populace who believes in what you're saying, will use you for everything you got until you're irrelevant, and then you're irrelevant.
Yeah. You said she's so possibly, yeah, did she really forget? I'm thinking about others who have made those statements that we as Black people need to just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps,
Yeah,
I'm thinking of Lil Wayne, who says, it was Lil Wayne who says he never experienced racism a day in his life.
yeah, like come on now, like come on, let's stop this madness. This is madness. And it's like, I know for a fact that money didn't send you into the movie Get Out and cause you to be a part of the coagula and your mind change. I know, but there's such an attraction to the sunken place in this hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe, in part, like Candace Owens, like Lil Wayne, there is a personal advantage to it than simply, they do. My hope is that they want to advance the people, but and this is a problem in and amongst Black culture. It's an individualism versus a communal understanding. For them, it's about, for some of them, as I perceive, I don't want to cast too much judgment, it's about themselves and what I can gain, and not the advancement of Black people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another perspective is it's about themselves in terms of how do you deal with the problem of pain, right? So um,
Wow,
many
wow,
people choose to face and deal with trauma and pain by completely divorcing themselves from it. And you know as you said, Avery, how could she kind of remove herself from the pain? There's a very real element of kind of completely shutting the door on
wow.
that aspect of me and only responding and using progression, life progression, financial progression, social progression, as my way of responding and reacting back to my own trauma and my own pain. Now, you're exactly right. The issue with that is, right, we're talking about a communal and social and people issue. And so, really, in that way of reacting and responding to pain, you help yourself, but only for a little bit, right?
Wow.
Because you can't continue to move throughout life holding a trauma, holding a blast of pain to that extent, and not facing it head on, not processing it, not dealing with it. So that strategy works for a bit. Um, or, right, in Lil Wayne's case, perhaps even denial, same kind of thing. Denying that it's been a part of me, denying that it's occurred. I'm just going to kind of cognitively and mentally shut that off
Yeah.
so that I can move forward within my own person. But it's just
Wow.
as you said, I only allow my own person to move forward. And we here are discussing that, as we started off talking about, every move we make, every decision, every life movement, every goal, every task we take on, it is deeply and steeply connected to moving a people group along, helping or hindering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Um,
so good.
someone commented, and I think that I have alluded to this in other lives, that I think that when we are privileged within our own group, there is still a level of ignorance that we have. So there may be this lack of knowledge because it is all of it is not our lived experience.
Right.
We can identify because we share the same looks, we share the same cultural values, we share a lot of the same things, but we don't all share the same experience. And
Right.
so while Candace may have had an incident in high school, she didn't share the experience of growing up underprivileged. She didn't share the experience of
Right.
growing up in an economically, disenfranchised. She didn't grow up without. So it
Right.
really isn't her experience. So it may just be very difficult for her to comprehend why people can't move forward. I'm doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that could be the reality. And I think even for people like Lil Wayne, there was another rapper as well. A part of this too is a self hatred.
Mm,
Um, and we see that in our community, dealing with skin color. Even in certain lyrics that we have in our, and even the light skin versus dark skin narrative, which I'm so glad I see. I'm hoping I see our community move a little beyond that and past that. Such a slavery archetype. Such a terrible trope that we've taken in ourselves. But I think that's also a part of it too. There is a level of a self hatred and also an association of Black culture is poverty, which a lot for a lot of Black culture, we were in the struggle. Yes, I do agree that, and there's beauty in Black culture, and how we overcame the struggle. It didn't have heat, put the oven on, and keep the oven open all day. You know, things of this nature. There's a beauty in that, but that's not the totality of our culture, right? That's not the totality of who we are. Our culture is not the sum of poverty,
Mm.
and I think that's something big too.
Yeah, and I think that goes exactly, it bridges the point you were making, Dr. Danita, as well as what you're saying here, Avery, is that as people, Candace finds a base in her community because as Black people move into privilege, you know,
Wow.
economic, right? So, yeah, there is
Yeah.
some moving on up that has happened, right? To some deluxe apartments. Some of us got some deluxe apartments, right?
Yeah.
You hear me, right?
Right, right,
Right, and
right.
our little business, whatever we did,
Yeah,
George Jefferson, it was the cleaners, but whatever we got going on, it's doing well, it's doing all right. And so we don't associate with that narrative
yeah,
that still dominates, to some extent, as you were saying, Avery. And some of it starts to get borrowed. Well,
Mm.
yeah, I did do it. um and it's that struggle there, even within our ranks,
yeah,
of how do we remain connected to our work, to our root, to the message, to the movement, even as we take on different points of privilege ourselves.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I'm going to ask you a question that I asked maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So, in our place of privilege, in Kansas's place of privilege, do you think that we have a responsibility to our community, to those who are less privileged, and we have more education, we have access to more resources? Do we have a responsibility to those who are less privileged but still look like us?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that is honestly our utmost responsibility, just as a community member, as a human being, and then definitely as a Black person living in America. um, I think for those of us who have moved along in any way, socially, financially, academically, it is incumbent upon us to somehow reach back, somehow, you know, go shoulder to shoulder, and I mean continue that grassroots work. Mentoring someone,
yeah,
taking in someone, going and getting someone as an apprentice, or just spending that little extra time at church on Sunday, whatever it is that you can do and offer. Because again, and this is where I like, this is kind of where the benefit of the doubt comes from. Um, we have to take care of ours,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. So true.
Yeah. And
So
so
true.
with that, and we're gonna come into a close and
So true.
wrap up. So you said we have to take care of ours. So I'm going to ask that question to you and Avery. I talk each week about the importance of us finding our lane and riding our lane, and figuring out what we can do, what we're passionate about that could affect change. And so when you think about the future and your lane and what you can do to affect change, what would you share with our audience as to how you can play your part?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for me here, I love to offer and share my adoption story. with others. Sometimes people ask, why have you adopted? Especially why have you adopted so many children? And I share, it's my heart. I share, it's, kind of a personal dream to have always had a large family. But I also share that um, it it's to build the Black community,
Wow.
right? To There's so many of our children kept in the system, left in the system, they age out of the system, and you know you talk about prison to pipeline in the school. Um, the um, the Child Protective Services line is another. It's just another line.
Wow.
Kids age out, and way too many of them are just straight into that line. They're not given resources. They're not given homes, and um, it's not like I was a huge crusader, but I knew what I was doing, right? I knew I was rescuing Black children from that end. And that's been very near and dear to me. And so I share that, now maybe people are not willing or ready to make that level of commitment, but I do talk about, getting into the schools, really helping in those spaces of education, in those spaces of after school programs, and definitely whatever you can to just show a young Black child, a young Black girl, a young Black boy, a reflection of themselves
Yeah.
in a different way, in a different space, um, in a way that's not conventional. I think is really pivotal. They need to see us as business owners, as lawyers, as therapists, as school counselors. They need to see us everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. I think from oh, go ahead, doctor.
No, I was just saying what you're saying. That's good.
Yeah. Good. So good. I think for me, a part of my activism is still in a embryonic stage. You know, in that progression, and I just want to say this to people who are listening to us: if you're a young and up and coming activist or reformer of some sort, your progression actually is adding to the advancement of our people,
Mm.
right? Your progression in school and education, because I know in moments for myself I'm even like I can be doing so much more, but I got the LSAT to do. I got, your progression in part is actually adding an advancement. It's actually denying the narrative that we were talking about earlier, denying the invisible narrative and actually putting a new narrative in the room. And so I think that's in part what I do, and also just a lot of activism, speaking out. I have a deep passion of purifying theologically where we see white supremacy. I have a deep passion in providing legal advocacy, free and fair legal advocacy in our communities. And so I just think my heart is to put my life and my body on the line for our advancement of our people in any way that I can.
I like that. I like that. And as I share every week, this is part of what I'm doing. This is part of my lane, bringing the education, bringing the awareness. As an educator, I mean, I absolutely love sharing information, but also in my field of mental health, just being able to provide a place, a safe place that
Yeah.
can come and the majority, although we have a very culturally diverse group of people that utilize the services, the majority of those that come because they feel safe with being in an African American practice, so to speak. I would say like 85% of our clients that come here are Black and brown people, and so being able just to provide a space for them to come to find that healing, to find that hope, that's my lane, and I enjoy what I do. I'm passionate about what I do, and so what I usually ask at the end of every live is that people who are listening, people who are viewing, take a moment to sit and think about where you are and how you're making a difference. Most of the people that I believe are right now that our viewers fall in the same category, so to speak, as I do in terms of privilege. So, what are you doing? What is your lane? How are you
Yeah.
planning to make this difference? And how are we going to move beyond the selfishness that a lot of us have been in? But now that we're coming to a new level of awareness, a new level of education, what are we going to do differently as we're moving forward? So that's my um, uh, what I'm sharing with you on tonight. Take that time to sit, to think, to reflect. What have I done? If I haven't done anything, what can I do differently going forward? What did I gain on tonight that is going to put me in a position to say I need to do something different? And so that is our show for this evening. Thank you so much, Avery. Thank you so much, Nakima. This was amazing dialogue. Thank you so much for joining us on this baggage claim, Unpack Your Bags with Dr. Danita evening. Have a good one.